This story begins on the street late at night. A little girl inside a poor house screamed that she wanted her mother. The woman rushed to her husband Chen Yu and grabbed his leg. She screamed at him in fear that he wanted to use Huan's daughter to pay off his debts. The wife screamed that she would take on more shifts and pay off his debt to Hui. The father carried his daughter in his arms. The girl stretched her arms forward and continued to call her mother. Chen was dissatisfied with his wife's earnings. He angrily reminded her about Hui. The frightened husband grabbed his wife by the hair and shouted that they had to repay the debt or they would be killed. The guy with his daughter in his arms swung with all his might and hit his wife in the face. She flew to the side. Chen headed towards the exit of the house. He was carrying the girl in his arms. Huan was calling her mother in fear. The beaten woman lay on the floor. She stretched out her hands in front of her and demanded that her husband return her daughter. The frightened and angry wife called her husband a bastard. She rushed towards him. The woman grabbed the guy from behind with her hand and sternly demanded that he give her back her daughter. Chen dodged to the side. The woman was able to grab her daughter and push him away with her head. The guy didn't notice how a bottle appeared under his foot. He stepped on it and slipped. The surprised protagonist couldn't hold on. He slipped and started falling to the floor. The guy fell unconscious on the floor. His frightened wife stood nearby and held her daughter in her arms. Chen was lying motionless on the floor. He hit his head and blood appeared near it. The woman held her daughter in her arms in silence. The daughter clung to her mother. She cried and screamed that she was very scared. The woman was calming the girl down. She was saying that it was all over. The mother held her daughter in her arms and calmed her down. She said that everything was fine. Chen was lying unconscious on the floor. Suddenly, some bandit kicked the door down. He demanded that Chen pay him back his debts. Chen was lying unconscious on the floor. There was a large pool of blood near his head. The leader looked at the guy on the floor with displeasure. He demanded that he pay him back anyway, even if he died. The boss turned to the side and angrily asked the woman, "Is everything he said correct?" The hostess silently looked at her husband's body on earth. Her frightened daughter stood next to her. The woman angrily shouted at the bandits to leave her house. People on the street were very surprised when they heard the noise coming from the house. The boss turned and looked at the door. He saw that passers-by were looking inside the house with interest. The leader turned around and shouted at the people to leave. He explained that they were not bandits, but just collectors. The stranger at the door asked the boss with displeasure, "Why do debt collectors kidnap children?" The leader angrily asked the old man, "Did he really want to interfere?" The boss put his hand in front of the old man's face and threatened that the guys might look for his money. Passers-by began to leave the house in fear. They did not want to get involved with the bandits. The leader turned around slyly and glanced at the woman. He shouted to the hostess that they would continue now. The hostess grabbed the knife in her hands. She shouted at the bandits not to come near her. A woman with a knife rushed to protect her daughter. She shouted that she would kill anyone who came near her. The bandits laughed evilly. They couldn't believe that the mistress could do anything to them. The boss approached the woman and angrily told her that he too once started out simply playing with knives. The man grabbed the woman by the hand and snatched the knife from her. Hui angrily told his partner that when he started playing with knives, she wasn't even in the plans yet. The boss pulled the mistress towards him by the hand. He angrily told her that he would show her how to handle a knife. The leader swung his hand sharply and ran the knife straight past the hostess's body. The bandits looked ahead in surprise. Someone shouted that their boss had good equipment. The hostess grabbed her clothes with her hands in fear. The man cut her t-shirt in front. The bandit touched the knife with his tongue and looked angrily at the hostess. He said that the guy knows how to choose women. The boss looked away with displeasure. At that moment, the girl bit him sharply on the shoulder. The frightened girl bit the leader's body with all her might. The boss with the knife looked angrily at the girl on the floor. He demanded that the bandits take her away. The frightened owner stood nearby. Huan was very scared. She stretched out her hands and called her mother. At that time, the bandit carried her away in his arms. The mother was very scared. She called her daughter with a trembling voice. The woman shouted in a frightened voice at the bandits to let her daughter go. She promised to do everything necessary for them. The boss looked very angrily at the owner and said that he would take everything from her. The woman looked angrily at the bandits and shouted that they should fear heavenly punishment for all their evil. The boss looked at the mistress angrily and stretched out his hands to her. He shouted that now the sky could fall to stop him. A bright bolt of lightning suddenly struck from the sky and pierced the roof of the building from above. A bright flash of lightning shot straight from the roof into the protagonist's body on the floor. The people in the room were scared. Pak Jin turned around, confused and suspicious. The hostess didn't understand what had happened. The main character suddenly jumped to his feet. He grabbed the bandit's hand with his own. The frightened boss looked at the guy. He didn't understand how he could come back to life. The hostess called the main character by name. The main character stood with a broken head and held the man's hand. Park Jin called out to Chen in bewilderment. Chen realized that his body was on the verge of death. The situation was catastrophic, and he needed to end it as soon as possible. The main character, in an angry and dissatisfied voice, demanded that the bandits let the child go and gather their fighters. The main character looked angrily at the frightened man and demanded that he get lost. The fighters stood around, frightened. They looked at the guy with bewilderment. One of the bandits suddenly laughed loudly and shouted that the main character had gone crazy. The bandit grabbed a huge blade in his hand. He was unhappy because the guy shouted at him to get lost. The boss swung his knife. He shouted at the main character that he would kill him now. Chen put his hand in front of him and blocked the leader's blow with it. Chen's eyes lit up very brightly. He activated Luo Tian's divine assembly. The guy swung his arm and hit the man with all his might. He decided to use all his strength. Cherney squeezed the bandit's hand with all his strength and turned it to the side. The frightened boss screamed very loudly. The main character broke his arm. The people around were very surprised. The bandits could not understand how the guy broke their boss's arm. The boss looked at the main character very angrily. Chen was silent in response. The fighter was holding a little girl in his arms. He angrily asked the main character how he dared to raise his hand against the boss. Chen swung his arm with all his might and hit the man in the face. The boss received a very strong blow from the main character, and his head turned to the side. The boss fell to the ground after the blow and knocked down one of his bandits. The fighter grabbed the boss with his arms. He shouted in displeasure that the guy dared to attack him. The bandit pointed his finger at the main character. He shouted to his accomplices to grab the guy. The fighter looked at the main character in fear. He decided to flee. The leader turned around in surprise and saw two of his fighters running towards the exit. The man said to himself in a dissatisfied voice that there was no honor left in this world. The beaten boss put his arm around one of his subordinates. He said contentedly that there was a place for loyalty in this world. The man pointed his finger at the main character. He demanded that his subordinate beat the guy. In return, he promised to promote the fighter. The hostess stood to the side and looked at all this with surprise. The subordinate ran to the exit. He shouted goodbye to the boss as he ran, saying that he would warn Park Jin to come and avenge him. The main character slowly approached the man from behind. His shadow covered the leader from behind. The boss was very scared. He looked away in fear and realized that no one would protect him anymore. The main character approached the frightened man. The leader screamed in fear. The boss was very scared. He warned the protagonist not to hurt Park Jin. He looked at the man with great displeasure and sternly demanded that he get out. The boss jumped to his feet in fright. He shouted in a breaking voice that he would do everything just like that. The leader ran out into the street. He said menacingly to himself that he would take revenge on the main character. Cherney was left alone in the room. Behind him stood his frightened daughter and wife. The hostess came to her senses. She came up to the main character and called him by name. The daughter in the house was very scared. She continued calling for her mother in a breaking voice. The woman hugged the Huan girl and asked her for forgiveness for making her worry. The main character turned around and told his wife and daughter to pack their things and leave quickly. The hostess and the girl turned around and looked at the guy with fear. The main character, with a bloody face, silently looked at his family members. The woman gathered her strength and asked the guy, "What will he do?" He really wanted to answer her, but he felt a strong pain in his body. The boy suddenly fell to his knees. He grabbed his head with his hands. The daughter and her mother looked at him from the side in fear. Chen held his head with his hands. He realized that he had exceeded the physical capabilities of this body. He had severe wounds. Chen looked at the floor in front of him and saw a bloody stain. He realized that he could not heal the wounds. The hostess picked up the guy with her hands. She was scared and asked with excitement, what was wrong with him? Blood continued to fall from Chen's head onto the floor. The main character found the strength in himself and looked at his wife. He asked her to help him heal. The partner answered the guy with displeasure that they no longer had money for the hospital. She wanted to borrow it from the neighbors. Chen very abruptly extended his hand forward and grabbed its owner by the hand. The main character hugged the hostess and calmed her down. He wanted to tell her something important. Han had already calmed down. She came up to her mother's side and slyly asked, "What are they doing here?" The main character and his wife turned around and silently looked at the girl. The hostess turned around and shouted to the girl in a displeased voice that they would now play with Daddy a little. Chen was sitting next to her. The daughter happily ran up to her parents and shouted that she wanted to play with them too. The woman sternly extended her hand to the girl's face and shouted that it was time for her to sleep. The hostess looked at her daughter with displeasure and said that they would play with her tomorrow. The silent protagonist sat next to her. Han looked at her parents from the side with great bewilderment and interest. The girl fell on the bed. She slyly asked her parents what she needed to cover her head with. The hostess angrily and discontentedly shouted at her daughter to go to bed and not get up. Han threw herself on the bed and closed her eyes. She slyly answered her mother that she would listen to her. Chen looked at the hostess with great desire and said that they would start now. The woman answered him that she agreed. Suddenly, the woman heard some noise behind her. She turned around in fear. Chen was still holding her in his arms. The hostess turned around and asked someone with displeasure how he could think about this now. The main character pulled his wife towards him and kissed her passionately. She thought that the guy was acting as if it wasn't him at all. During the kiss, the hostess thought that the guy saved her because he drove the thugs out of the house. Chen folded his hands behind his wife, and a fire appeared near them. He used the divine cave. This was the section of the healing method of yin-yang harmony. Chen sat on the floor of the room next to his wife. There were fiery lights around them. True yang stimulated the essence. The hostess felt a surge of energy in her body. Streams of desire formed an elixir. The main character began to suck the fire energy from the hostess's body. His flesh was restored. His bones were fused. Death was turned back. The fighter near the punching bag was hitting her with all his might with powerful blows. The athlete swung with all his might and hit the punching bag with his elbow. It suddenly moved to the side. The satisfied fighter stood to the side in a fighting stance, watching the punching bag swing in front of him. Suddenly, traces of blood appeared on the sports equipment. There was someone inside it. The fighter looked happily at the sports equipment and said that it was great to let off steam by beating up a human soul. The stranger inside the punching bag called out in a plaintive voice to Hui. The man inside the punching bag angrily reminded Park Jin that he should have left his wife and child alone. The fighter stood silently and listened to him. Park Jin turned around and headed for the exit. He told the stranger in the punching bag that he always keeps his word. The fighter stopped and put a towel over his shoulders. He told his victim that he needed to let off some steam. The fighter stood next to the punching bag and looked at it happily. The stranger inside shouted at Park Jin that he would pay for all the evil he had done. The frightened boss ran into the room from the side with his fighters. He called Park Jin. The boss shouted to the chieftain in a breaking voice that they had failed to carry out the target. Park Jin threw the towel off his shoulders in displeasure. He shouted at the boss who had come in that he had already repeated the conditions to him several times. The fighter took a fighting stance. He angrily explained to the guests that this girl was urgently demanded by his great patron. After that, Park Jin swung his arm with all his might and hit the punching bag. A beaten guy fell out. The boss and his subordinates were frightened when they heard such words from Park Jin. Park Jin looked at his hanging victim and said angrily that there was no room for error. The athlete turned away with displeasure. He told his subordinates that they couldn't even handle a pathetic pimp. One of the bandits excitedly told that the main character was to blame for everything. Chen began to ossify, but then suddenly came to life like a zombie. This guy broke the boss's arm. Park Jin fell silent. He turned around with displeasure at his subordinate and studied him carefully with his eyes. The fighter took a closer look and saw that the boss's hand was completely bandaged. He decided to approach him. Park Jin approached the man and sternly asked him how he could break his arm. The fighter grabbed the man by his healthy arm and asked how the guy could break it. Park Jin squeezed the frightened man's hand with all his strength and broke it. The boss screamed very loudly. He felt a strong pain in his arm after it was broken. Park Jin approached his subordinates and sternly demanded that they get rid of the man. The bandits grabbed the boss and dragged him towards the exit. The man screamed at Park Jin to spare him and give him another chance. The boss looked angrily to the side. He told the fighters to take their weapons and follow the woman together. The main character was in the house with his wife. It was a bright day outside. The hostess was sitting on the floor and breathing very deeply. Her eyes were closed. Chen stretched out his hand forward and hugged his wife. She wrapped her arms around him. The main character looked at the woman and thanked her for saving him. The hostess looked thoughtfully to the side and told the main character that he was not at all like her real husband. The woman said in a thoughtful voice that her husband had never been so gentle. He also had not caused such strange feelings in her. The hostess looked closely at the guy and asked very sternly who he was. Chen looked at his partner and said that he was an immortal celestial being. He came down because of a disaster. Jiang Tianchen was the mortal incarnation of the protagonist, who lived among people. It so happened that the guy's soul flew away due to a serious wound. The main character was able to take control of his body. The hostess asked the guy in surprise, "Is he really God?" He very sternly answered his partner that everything was exactly like that. At this time, the daughter woke up. She asked her parents with displeasure if they had finished playing, and asked her parents with displeasure if she could get up already. She was already very hungry. The mother anxiously told the girl to wake up quickly. She promised to cook something for her. Chen looked slyly at the girl and said that he had only distracted her mother for a while. The main character and his wife felt their stomachs growling. They felt very hungry. The hostess looked at the guy and asked in a sly voice, "Do immortal people really need to eat too?" The partner answered the woman that she was very rude. The woman stood up and told the guy that she would prepare his share for him now. The hostess heated up the stove and began to cook pasta in a pot of water. Huan looked into the pot with appetite. She asked her mother if she would add an egg to the noodles. The woman told the girl that she would add 1 egg for her. The main character stood in the room behind and looked with interest at his daughter and mother near the stove. Chen thought to himself that he had spent 10,000 years in comprehending the Tao. Chen looked at the woman with the girl holding food in her hands. He thought that this is what home felt like. The main character, with his eyes closed, told himself that all this was very wonderful. Suddenly, someone knocked down the door to the apartment with all their might and prepared to enter. Park Jin and his fighters burst into the apartment. He looked at the people angrily and greeted them. The hostess was very scared when she saw strangers at the entrance. Chen turned around with displeasure and looked away. The woman was so scared that she dropped the plate of food from her hands and she started selling it down. Chen very quickly reached forward and was able to catch the falling plate of noodles. The main character turned around and asked the guests with displeasure who they were. The wife told the guy with fear that their brother Park Jin had come to see them. The man looked at the main character silently and very angrily. He studied him carefully with his eyes. The daughter grabbed her mother's leg in fear and screamed that she was very scared. The main character continued to eat food calmly. He told the woman and her daughter that no one could hurt them now. He had already fully recovered. The man looked angrily at the guy and said that he was a pimp and worked for this old man. The protagonist angrily told the guests to leave. He promised to spare them. He looked to the side in great fear and saw some dangerous metal disc flying towards him. Park Jin swung his arm with all his might and hit the protagonist with his hand. The guy put his hand forward to defend himself. The fighter swung his arm wide and with all his might, he smashed the table with a powerful blow. Chen flew far to the side. Park Jin stretched out his hand in front of him. He said angrily, "The minor characters die because they talk too much." The guy was lying on the ground. His daughter and mother called him out in fear. Park Jin stood contentedly to the side. His subordinate fighters were nearby. Park Jin looked at the beaten guy and said in a dissatisfied voice to the fighters that they couldn't deal with this trash. A subordinate came up from behind and angrily asked what they would do with an adult woman. Park Jin told the soldiers to do whatever they wanted with the woman, and when they were done, they were to bury the body. The bandit glared at the woman and thanked his boss for the reward. The fighter looked at his victim with great desire and angrily, he extended his hand towards her. The frightened woman called her husband. She hugged her daughter. The girl frightenedly called her dad. Chen suddenly jumped up and kicked one of the attackers with all his might. One of the bandits flew far to the side after being hit by the main character. Park Jin and his subordinates were very surprised. Chen landed on the floor after the blow. His surprised wife happily called him by name. The man lit a cigarette. He looked slyly at the main character and praised him. Park Jin carefully studied the main character and realized that inside the guy there is the power of a superhuman. The fighter carefully examined the main character. He felt a strange radiation inside him. Park Jin swung his arm and rushed forward at the protagonist. He shouted that the old man had underestimated him. Chen very quickly and deftly dodged the opponent's attack. The hand flew over his head. The main character looked ahead in fear and saw the man swinging his arm to hit him again. Chen turned to the side at the woman and the girl. He realized that he had to protect them now. The main character suddenly stretched his hand forward and was able to repel Park Jin's attack. Behind him was a frightened girl with her mother. The man felt a very strong pain in his arm. He realized that it was broken. Park Jin shouted in an angry voice that he heard a crunching sound in his hand. The man swung and prepared to hit the guy. He wanted to tell him about punching bags in an angry voice. Park Jin beat the main character and shouted at him that the best punching bags are made from living people. The fighter looked angrily at the guy and told him not to lean back until he reached the peak of pleasure. Chen defended himself with his hand from the opponent's blow. He realized that his current body was weak and he could not hold out any longer. The main character looked angrily ahead and remembered that he could use the event technique. Chen raised his hand up in front of him. The new technique did not require ki energy. The guy put his hand to his head. He thought that he didn't need a strong body to use the technique. The protagonist put his hand to his head. He activated the Luotian divine thought and martial arts demonstration. There was a bright glow around him. Chen opened his eyes and they lit up brightly. The guy created a divine consciousness of a 10-year mental space. Park Jin swung his arm wide to hit the protagonist, which surprised him because of his fighting stance. The protagonist watched attentively as his opponent's fist flew towards his head. He thought about 10 years of practice. The guy's eyes lit up brightly. He mastered the skills of boxing and was ready to channel his inner strength. Chen stretched out his hand in front of him and prepared to block his opponent's blow with it. Park Jin was very surprised. He did not understand what was happening. The main character grabbed his hand. The main character turned sharply and hit his opponent on the head with his elbow with all his might. The guy had mastered the art of merging energy and technique over 20 years of practice. Park Jin turned around and looked at the guy very angrily. He called him a bastard. The main character swung and wanted to hit the man with all his might. The boss shouted at the guy that he would destroy him. Chen very sharply put his leg forward and blocked his opponent's kick with it. The guy ducked and prepared to attack the bandit further. After 30 years of practice, he was a master of boxing who put free will into the fight. Chen hit the man in the stomach with all his might. It was a hegemonic blow. The bandit looked away in fear. He saw that his brother Park Jin had fallen unconscious to the floor. Fighters rushed from all sides with their weapons against the main character. The protagonist's eyes lit up. He thought that he had 50 years of practice and a complete understanding of the martial path. He threw all the bandits to the sides with very powerful blows from his hands. The frightened chieftain angrily asked the guy if he knew who was behind him. A bright magic sign lit up on the protagonist's forehead. It was the Heavenly Eye. Park Jin glared at the guy and said that there was a big shot behind him that was better not to mess with. Chen stretched his hand forward to the bandit's throat. Park Jin sternly threatened the guy not to even dare touch him. The guy abruptly tore the medallion off the body of the man in front of him with his hand. The fighter wheezed loudly. Park Jin sat exhausted on the ground. He asked the guy with displeasure, "How did he find out?" The main character looked closely at the magic talisman in his hand. He said in a thoughtful voice that this is exactly how things are. Chen looked closely at the amulet. It had an image of a demonic face on it. The main character pressed his hand on the amulet. A small evil demon appeared from it. A burning red monster emerged from the amulet and glared at the man. Chen looked at the demonic monster with displeasure and sternly called him an impudent fellow. Chen holding the amulet in his hands, he activated the divine power of Daluo. A huge blue Buddha appeared behind him. The demonic monster got scared. He decided to hide back in his artifact. Chen looked thoughtfully ahead and said that everything here was getting interesting. He thought that the Yinshan technique was related to the possession of the spirit of the baby. The protagonist looked closely at the image of the demon on the amulet. The guy thought that the ghost drains the owner's life force. In return, it gives a surge of combat power reaching its peak. Park Jin's real age was 30 years old. The protagonist understood why his physical body was inferior to his opponent's. He understood that the man had the essence of the new world behind him. Park Jin sat on the ground in front of the main character. He realized that he couldn't defeat the guy. The bandit told the main character with excitement that he no longer needed the girl. He asked the guy to spare his life. The main character looked angrily at the frightened man and shouted at him to get lost with the bandits. Chen stood to the side. He saw how Pa Jin came out into the street together with his beaten fighters. The main character entered the room. The daughter joyfully ran up to him with open arms. Chen grabbed the girl in his arms. The daughter hugged her father and shouted to him that he was very handsome. The boy felt very embarrassed when his daughter kissed him. Chen looked at the girl with bewilderment. He did not understand why her kiss warmed his heart so much. The guy held his daughter in his arms. He slyly asked her, "Is he really handsome?" Huan happily answered her partner that he really was handsome. The hostess came up from the side. She told the main character to come with her quickly. The woman reminded the guy that he had let Pa Jingge go yesterday. Now this bandit could bring in more dangerous people. The hostess anxiously suggested that the main character quickly pack his things. Chen hugged his wife. He explained to her that he had let the bandit go on purpose. The partner asked the guy with displeasure, why did he let Park Jin go? Chen explained to his wife that the spiritual aura in the mortal world is very weak. More time is needed to improve it through meditation. The protagonist showed the woman the magical medallion in his hand. He said that the person behind Park Ji-nong is a lonely cultivator. He remained in this world after the division into humans and immortals. The magical artifact can be useful for the cultivation of Chen and his wife. The hostess was surprised when the guy told her that he planned to improve himself with her. Chen asked his partner if she wanted to work with him on self-improvement and achieve immortality. The daughter grabbed her father's hand. She asked excitedly if they would be able to fly. He answered the girl very happily. That's exactly what it all meant. The joyful Huan spread her arms out to the sides and shouted that she wanted to fly with her dad. The hostess asked the guy how she should train with her daughter. Chen said that his daughter had a body with the innate essence of a yin girl. He decided to prepare pills for Huan. Han cunningly asked her father to make her some delicious pills with sugar. Chen looked at his daughter and promised that he would make sweet pills for her. The happy daughter grabbed her father's hand and shouted that she would not refuse sweets. The protagonist told his wife that their bodies were already adults. The innate essence was gone. Now it was best for them to practice the double cultivation method. Chen hugged the woman and said that they couldn't waste time yet. They needed to start now to be ready to meet new enemies. The owner was surprised when she realized that the guy offered her a workout in broad daylight. Han ran up to her parents and excitedly shouted that they needed to train hard. The girl ran to the exit. She shouted to her parents that she was going for a walk. The mother shouted to her daughter not to go far. Han slyly looked out from behind the door. She asked her mother if it would be enough if she walked until lunch. Chen and his wife looked at their daughter in silence and with displeasure. The mistress asked the guy if he wanted her to get into the same position as before. Chen answered his partner that he wanted it that way. The main character grabbed the frightened woman in his arms. She screamed in fear. The hostess asked the guy in fright, "What is he doing?" He grabbed her and held her by the legs. The main character held his wife by the legs and turned her to the side. The hostess asked him in fear, "What is he going to do?" Chen bent the woman's back to the side. She lay on the floor and screamed that she couldn't do it anymore. The guy told his wife to do whatever he said. The woman shouted in a loud and dissatisfied voice that her back hurt. The main character put his hand in front of his wife's face and shouted at her not to worry. It was going to get better soon. Chen prepared to stand on his head next to his partner. He wanted to use the dual cultivation method to rejuvenate and bloom the lotus. Chen jumped on the head and touched his feet to the feet of his mistress. The main character stood with his wife in meditative yoga poses. There was bright energy around them. The process of hiding the ligaments and restoring the postpartum light was taking place. The woman with her eyes closed did not understand why everything in her body were relaxed. Warmth emanated from him. The surprised hostess suddenly felt as if she were lying in a hot spring. In the center of a big city, a guy was sitting on a sofa hugging a girl. She took the microphone in her hand and invited her companion to meow. There were bottles of drinks on the table in front of them. The client held a microphone in his hands and happily sang a song about meowing. She sat next to him, pleased. The door to the room suddenly opened and a frightened Park Jin ran in. He called out to the young master with excitement. The guy asked the guest with displeasure if he had brought what he had asked him for. The frightened man fell to his knees. He asked the young master to forgive him. Park Jin excitedly revealed that the main character was an ordinary pimp, but suddenly he became incredibly strong. The man said in a frightened voice that his brothers were with him. They all risked their lives. The guy still turned out to be stronger. C, with the microphone in his hand, fell silent. He looked at his guest with displeasure and very menacingly. The guy suddenly got very angry. He squeezed his hand and crushed the microphone. Park Jin fell down in a bow before the guy. He asked him in fear to save his life. He suddenly calmed down. He told his guest that he could sometimes reward even defeat. He looked at the man and said that for his great merits he wanted to give him an award. The girl next to the guy looked at him in fear. She threw her girlfriend to the man and shouted for him to take her with him and have some fun. Park Jin grabbed the frightened girl with his hands. He angrily thanked the guy for such a reward. The guy looked closely at his subordinate and laughed evilly. He looked angrily at the man and reached out his hand to grab him by the head. He put his hand on the frightened man's head and squeezed it with all his strength. Park Jin called out to the young master with a very frightened voice. The man had Mr. Sai's hand above his head. Dark aura appeared next to him. Park Jin asked with displeasure, "Why is his boss doing this?" The guy continued to squeeze the man's head with his hand. He told him angrily that he can reward and punish. He told Park Jin in a stern voice that he had rewarded him even for the fact that he couldn't bring the girl. The guy angrily shouted at his subordinate that he had lost the magical artifact that he had given him. He said to the man in an angry voice that he could be punished for this. The dark aura left Park Jin's head. The guy held his hand over the man's head and pulled a dark clot of energy out of his head. The fighter lowered his head down in exhaustion. He held a dark aura in his hands and called his subordinate useless. The girl on the side was very scared when she saw all this. He absorbed a clot of dark energy into himself. He said with displeasure that he would have to do everything himself. The frightened girl shouted to the young gentleman that she wanted to leave. He turned around and looked sternly at his girlfriend. He shouted that her time was not up yet. The guy pointed his hand at the man's head. He was getting ready to finish him off. C touched his finger to the man's head. He used the 7 demons' dead cleansing. Park Jin very suddenly began to turn into a monster. His head turned white and fangs appeared. Clumps of red energy appeared around the demonic man. He growled very angrily. Suddenly, Park Jin's body went limp. He leaned down in front of him. C and the frightened girl watched him from the side. The girl was very scared. She realized that the man had turned into a predatory zombie. The monster suddenly swung its arm and rushed forward towards its victim. The client was very scared. She realized that the monster was preparing to kill her now. Park Jin swung his hand and hit the girl on the head with all his might. The guest of the establishment fell dead to the ground, the demonic Park. Jin killed her with a blow to the head. Park Jin was very happy. He looked at the body of his victim with anger and satisfaction. He shouted from the side to the man to follow him after the girl. The monster rushed towards the client's body and stretched out his predatory hand towards her. The main character stood on his head next to his girlfriend in meditative poses. He was getting ready to kiss her. After kissing the guy, blue energy began to fill my lungs. The kidneys in the protagonist's body began to change. There were clots of purple energy around them. The main character sat with his eyes closed in a meditative pose. His wife fell to the floor next to him. The hostess rose to her feet with her eyes closed and came to her senses. Chen looked at the hostess with interest and asked, "How is she feeling?" The girl stretched. She felt lightness and comfort in her body. Her back pain even went away. Chen looked closely at his wife and suggested that she continue her spiritual practices. The woman turned around and asked the guy in surprise, "Is this really not enough anymore?" Chen explained to his partner that they could not resist the advancing enemies as mortals. They needed to quickly open the small heavenly circulation. This would help enter the Qi cultivation realm. The hostess asked the guy in surprise, "How could they do all this quickly?" Chen showed his partner the medallion. The guy was able to comprehend Da in the highest kingdom of thousands of years. He mastered all the laws with the help of this method and self-improvement. They could penetrate the kingdom overnight. The hostess looked at the guy with fear and said that he was holding an evil artifact in his hands. Chen said that the attainment of Tao involves generating essence and transforming it into Qi, along with the purification of the spirit. There is also breath control and initial meditation. The main character told his partner about the double perfection of emptiness and joy. The ancient warrior sat on the bed hugging his girlfriend. Chen told the hostess about the method of collecting and toning. Chen sat next to the woman and held the talisman in his hand. He told her the details about the method of collection and toning. The hostess looked at the talisman in surprise. She couldn't believe that it also contained life energy. Chen sat in a meditative pose and held the artifact in his hands. He told his partner that this talisman would be enough for them to break through and practice Qi. The guy looked at his wife and said that they couldn't waste time. If they broke through, they would gain the strength to protect their daughter. The hostess excitedly told the guy that they could start right now. She didn't know what she should do. Chen took the medallion in his mouth. He told the girl to bite him and he would guide her further. The girl bit the artifact in the guy's mouth from the side. Dark energy appeared around them. A bright red dot lit up in the girl's chest. The protagonist cast a magic spell for the double cultivation method. Chen held his wife in his arms. She told him that she felt good from below. The woman opened her eyes and looked at the guy. She felt that he was somehow ashamed. Chen explained to his wife with his eyes closed that all this was a sign of Qi breaking through 3 barriers. The woman would feel all kinds of pain, but she should let it flow naturally. The guy was ready to help her overcome the barrier. The hostess felt a very strong surge of energy in her body. It spread throughout her. The sweat was running down the hostess's body. She told the guy that she felt a warm wave from her head to her toes. The woman told the boy in surprise that the effect of double cultivation was simple and fast. Chen explained to his partner with a smile that the method only seemed simple. In fact, it was very difficult to achieve. The protagonist held a talisman in his hand. He told the woman that in the process of improvement, both participants must trust each other completely. Chen told his wife that people who can trust each other are very rare. Double perfection cannot turn into forced gathering and death. The mistress of the house was very surprised. She said that the guy had just descended into the mortal world and already trusted her very much. Chen explained to the woman that all the memories of her were stored in his mind. His earthly incarnation had failed her, but he saw a real treasure in her. The woman looked at the main character with great interest and surprise. Chen brought his wife closer to him and said that she must now help him break through the barrier. At the same time, Huan was sitting in the sandbox and playing. She was making something out of sand. The demonic and evil Park Jin approached the girl from the side. He extended his hand to her. The main character hugged his wife and kissed her. There was bright red energy around them. Chen turned around and excitedly told the woman that there was an enemy next to them. The mother became worried and turned to the side. She called her daughter in fear. The main character hugged his mistress. He demanded that she hold on tightly and not move. Chen hugged his wife. He asked her to help him break through the barrier. The girl in the sandbox got scared when she saw a strange man next to her. The girl was scared when she saw the demonic Park Jin. She called her parents in fear. The angry monster swung his arms. He rushed at the girl from above and wanted to kill her. The main character, together with his girlfriend, ran out into the street in an embrace. The girl looked at them in surprise. The daughter in the sandbox ran to her parents. She screamed that she was very scared. Park Jin fell to the ground from the side. Chen was holding his wife in his arms. He shouted to his daughter to stand behind him and close her eyes. The monster came to life and began to rise to its feet. It growled very angrily and loudly. He looked at the monster with great fear and realized that it was an improved corpse. An angry demon with burning eyes and loud screams rushed forward at the people. Chen dodged to the side of the demon. He used a combination of attack and defense against him. The main character swung with all his might and hit the monster in the chest with his hand. He looked ahead with great fear. He realized that the improved dead were not afraid of either pain or death. The protagonist pierced the mutant's chest with his hand. The dead man fought with suicidal determination. The zombie suddenly found strength in himself and grabbed the man's hand. He swung his paw and prepared to hit the guy. Chen looked ahead with excitement and remembered the acupuncture point Yuan. The woman called her husband in fear. Suddenly, a very bright burning lightning bolt came out of the main character's body. Chen very sharply and quickly swung his hand and hit the monster in the chest with it. A very bright fire explosion was heard near the demon's body. After the guy's blow, a Zotian and a realm of key purification were opened. The guy pressed his palm to the dead man's chest with all his might. He shouted that true yang conquers evil. The monster raised its head in fear and screamed very angrily. Park Jin fell to the ground after being hit by a magical attack from a human. Chen held his hand over the monster's body. The main character turned around and asked the woman if everything was okay. The partner answered with fear that everything was fine. Huan was sitting in the sandbox behind a big pile. She asked her parents in fear if they had defeated the monster. The father answered his daughter that they had won. The mother smiled and told the girl that they had won. The woman looked closer and saw that Park Jin's body was lying on the ground next to them. The hostess looked closely at the man's body and did not understand what had happened to him. Chen examined the monster's body and explained that he had been turned into an improved corpse. The woman excitedly told her husband that the man had turned into a zombie. The protagonist looked at the mutant's body and said that he was just a dead doll. His soul was taken out and his essence was changed. Suddenly, someone came up from the side and clapped their hands at the main character. An unfamiliar guy came up from the side and clapped for the main character along with the woman. He clapped his hands. He angrily told the main character that he belongs to a serious network. He was able to defeat his monster. Chen, without turning around, shouted to his wife and daughter to come into the house. The woman warned the guy to be careful. The hostess ran into the house in fear, holding her daughter in her arms. The guy watched her go. The mother ran to the side and carried her frightened daughter away in her arms. She looked thoughtfully at the main character. He said that he had a hidden unique talent. Cherny very sharply took a side. He did not want to listen to what she told him. The main character jumped up very abruptly and rushed forward to attack his opponent. Chen swung his arms sharply and prepared to finish off his opponents with the help of the Grandmaster's Kingdom. The main character saw in fear how someone swung a blade right next to his head. Chen jumped back very quickly to a safe distance. He saw a warrior with a sword appear next to him. The fighter jumped up from above and swung his blade to hit the guy. Chen very quickly and very sharply dodged the warrior's blow backwards. The main character suddenly stretched his hand forward and grabbed the blade in the fighter's hand. Chen hit his opponent in the chest with a very powerful and strong blow. He managed to snatch his sword. The main character asked Mr. Sai in a dissatisfied voice, "What other tricks does he have?" C looked at the guy with interest and said that he had put all his efforts into defeating the corpse and the low-level ghost warrior. The young gentleman angrily asked the protagonist, "Did he really think that he could fight him?" A dark aura appeared near the boy's body. He wanted to show the main character the gap between him and the clan that owns traditional techniques. From under the ground, the bodies of demonic warriors began to rise. He strictly demanded that the main character give him his woman and daughter, and then he knelt down and licked his boots. In a stern voice, he told the main character that he might allow him to become his new hat. A group of demonic warriors, along with blades, rushed forward towards the main character. Chen stood and closed his eyes. He calmly watched as a demon with a large sword attacked him. Suddenly, some monster stretched out his hand forward and grabbed the frightened man by the neck from behind. The frightened boy looked to the side and saw that Park Jin had come to life and was holding him by the neck from behind with his hand. He asked the main character in fear how he was able to revive the corpse. The young master turned back and looked at the monster. He didn't understand why this corpse was so strong. Chen, with a sword in his hand, said in a calm voice that when a corpse merges with a yin child, their agility and strength rise to a new level. The talisman in the monster's chest began to burn very strongly. Dark aura was coming from it. He shouted in a frightened voice to the main character that he wouldn't be able to hold him back. The boy screamed angrily that even his part was very precious. He bit his finger with his teeth to get some blood. He dripped blood from his finger onto his forehead and shouted at the main character to look at it. The excited young gentleman grabbed the finger with his teeth and bit it. He put a bloody mark on his forehead. He shouted for the protagonist to look at it. A magical mark lit up on the boy's head. It was the skill of incineration. A pink mist appeared around the young master. It was the golden silkworm key shield. C in the pink fog looked angrily at the main character and laughed. Behind him, Park Jin fell to the ground. The main character looked angrily at his opponent and said nothing to him. He looked at the guy sternly and piercingly. He shouted that it was the end for him. Chen swung his arm sharply and prepared to hit his opponent with all his might. C dodged back in fear. Chen decided to concentrate all his strength into the blow. He would seal the acupuncture points in his opponent's body and cut his meridians. The main character punched the guy in the body with all his might. A powerful blow. The young gentleman dodged to the side. The protagonist struck him in the points on his body. The beaten one rose from the earth. He looked very angrily at the main character. The young gentleman sternly shouted at the guy that he was asking to die. He tore off the shirt on his chest, on which hung the golden medallion. He shouted to the main character that he would kill him. The young master brought the magical golden artifact to his mouth. He read the magic spell inside the amulet. It summoned the spirits of the 9 underworlds. The young gentleman was kneeling and continued to read his prayer inside the medallion. Chen stood to the side. He looked at her with great surprise and incomprehension. The young master looked at the artifact in his hands and called upon a strong spirit. The main character decided not to waste time. He swung his hand with all his might and hit her in the face. The protagonist looked at the lying guy. He said in a dissatisfied voice that the unfortunate remnants of the end of the Dharma era become dumber the longer they live. Chen looked at his opponent with displeasure and explained that he had cast a summoning spell during the fight. The protagonist turned to the side. He noticed that the demonic Park Jin had gone inside himself and raised his head. The main character looked angrily at the monster and said in a satisfied voice that it was time to work. Chen came to the door of his house and knocked on it. He shouted to his wife and daughter that it was he who had come. The main character entered the apartment. He happily told his wife that it was all over. The hostess breathed a sigh of relief. She realized that she was no longer in danger. The frightened woman glanced to the side. She noticed someone walking towards the house. The hostess was frightened when she saw Pa Jin approaching their house, dragging the body of the young master behind him. The frightened girl screamed that she was very scared. The monster was back. Park Jin looked at the little girl with displeasure and anger, but said nothing to her. Chen stroked his daughter's head. He told her that the monster would do whatever she asked, and asked the guy, "Is this all true?" Chen answered her that she could try. The girl stood on the porch. She asked the monster to show her the heart. Park Jin was still standing and holding the unconscious boy by the leg. Park. Jin looked at the girl with displeasure. He bowed his head down and remained silent. Suddenly, the monster came to life. He put his hands on his head and made a heart. Hwan clapped her hands happily. She demanded that the demon stand on his hands. The dead man suddenly turned over and jumped into her arms. The girl was very happy. The woman asked the guy with displeasure, "Why did he bring a dead man here?" The body of the young gentleman lay before them. The protagonist told his wife that the demonic warriors are the crippled remains of the Yin Mountain. Many of their kind have already been lost, but they still do not bear the burden of thousands of years of experience. Chen looked at the boy's body. Z was the heir to this path of cultivation. He had reached the peak in the realm of qi purification. The young master's body was filled with pure essence. He could help the protagonist and his wife quickly advance in their cultivation. The main character slyly suggested that the woman look for useful artifacts in the guy's body. They could help them in the fight against future enemies and in protecting their daughter. The young gentleman sat tied up on a chair in the house. He began to come to his senses. He opened his eyes. He looked at the people around him with great displeasure. The young gentleman asked the main character with displeasure if he knew who he was. The prisoner angrily told the protagonist that he dared to touch the powerful Z family from the southeast. At the side, Hwan was sitting on Pak Jin's back. The young gentleman angrily demanded that the protagonist believe him. Chen handed over a small piece of cloth and stuck it into the mouth of the surprised prisoner. The young gentleman became very angry. He kept trying to spit the rag out of his mouth. C turned around in surprise. He saw the girl sitting astride Hui. The main character looked sternly at the prisoner and said that he would take a look and see what useful thing he had. Chen tore the medallion from his captive's neck. The wife looked at the artifact in surprise and asked the guy, "Why did he carry the seal with him?" The protagonist looked at the artifact and said that this seal is used to make a contract with the evil spirits of the 9 underworlds. It can be used to summon spirits and drive them out, but you have to pay a lot to summon them. C looked at the main character with displeasure. Chen said that the seal was made very crudely. It was impossible to summon anything powerful with its help. He shouted discontentedly at the main character that this seal had been passed down in his family from generation to generation. The young gentleman said that the seal served to worship a fierce ghost king who had been aging the world of living people for centuries. The main character got tired of the prisoner's conversations. He hit him on the head with all his might. C looked at the main character very angrily. He didn't believe that Cher dared to hit him. Chen hit his captive on the head with all his might once more. He used the chatty slap of silence. The protagonist held the artifact in his hands. He received a low-level seal of worship to the Ghost King. Chen stretched out his hand and took out a low-grade golden silkworm from the prisoner's body. The protagonist reached forward and removed the belt from the young gentleman's clothes. The hostess on the side was very scared. She called the main character with excitement. The woman asked the main character with displeasure, "Why did he take off the prisoner's pants?" Chen looked at the spiritual artifact in his hands. It was a belt that fascinated the mind. Chen looked into the young master's pockets. He saw many Yin Mountain talismans. The protagonist unbuttoned the prisoner's clothes. He received a piece of the talisman's golden underwear. Chen was holding the young gentleman's wallet in his hands. He had never seen one like it before. Chen took out a small business card from his wallet. He didn't feel any magical energy coming from this item, but it was very delicate work. He told the guy and the woman in an angry voice that they would never get such a black VIP card. It was unlimited. The young gentleman told the kidnappers in a sly voice that he would give them the card if they let him go. The protagonist threw the card aside. He said that he was not interested in the currency of mortals. The hostess carefully examined the magical artifacts that lay on the floor. The woman looked at the magical things with surprise. She said that it was completely covered with treasures. The main character from behind told his wife that the quality of the items was not very good, but it was better than having nothing. C silently watched all this from behind. The young gentleman opened his mouth slyly, and a small insect crawled out from inside. Chen told the hostess from behind not to look at the objects anymore. They could deal with something of great value. The hostess turned to the side and asked, "Where could there be such a great treasure?" Chen pointed his finger at the frightened prisoner. He said that the essence of a person at the peak of qi cultivation is a real nourishing elixir for a cultivator. The protagonist said that their captive had drained the life force of many people. He asked the guy in fear what he wanted to do. He looked very sternly at the victim and said that they would now take something from him too. The young gentleman threatened the main character that his family would crush him. Chen became very angry. He swung his hand and hit the prisoner in the face with all his might. The hostess pointed at the prisoner with displeasure. She did not want to press her lips to the SE to absorb the essence. Chen looked at the young master with displeasure and said that he would not allow him to experience anything. The protagonist glanced at the prisoner and said that there was a method to collect essence using the yin child, which the young master used. High-level masters can use the star absorption technique. They can directly separate the essence from the target's body. The mistress became agitated. She impatiently demanded that the guy take the prisoner's essence. She did not feel any guilt for exhausting such a bastard. The beaten young gentleman sat silently on a chair and said nothing. Chen told his wife that they needed to use dual cultivation to get the same result as the star absorption technique. The protagonist glared angrily at the young gentleman and told his wife that they had to start right away. The hostess asked the guy with excitement, "Do they really need to get into those same strange positions again?" The main character hugged his wife and said that they would not do this now. Chen came close to the woman and began to tell her the details about the star absorption technique. The hostess happily told the guy that she understood him completely. Cupping therapy had a similar principle. The main character answered his partner in a confident voice that everything was exactly like that. Chen leaned against and kissed his wife. He told her that they needed to get started. A yellow glow appeared between the main character and his wife. It was the star kiss technique. The main character extended his hand to the side and touched the prisoner's body with it. Yellow energy started to emanate from the protagonist's hand. He continued to kiss the woman. The hostess closed her eyes. She felt a very strong energy begin to flow through her body. Chen, during the kiss, demanded that his wife direct the absorbed essence into their own Dantion. A servant ran into the family's ancestral estate. He ran very quickly down the corridor to the office. The servant ran into the large office. He shouted to the master that something terrible had happened. The servant shouted to the master in a frightened voice that the young master was in danger. The owner angrily reminded the servant that there were respected guests next to him and that he had behaved very rudely. A Buddhist monk with a large rosary around his neck sat on the chair. He said in a calm voice that the butler Jiang was always reliable and responsible. The monk asked the servant what had happened to the young master C. Jiang felt very scared and embarrassed. He was afraid to tell the truth to his master. The master sternly demanded that the servant answer him clearly. Jiang told the master that the insect that had been following him had returned from the young master. He immediately asked the servants about the whereabouts of Z. The servant looked at the monk carefully. The Buddhist sat absolutely calm. Jiang explained that the young master had gone looking for companionship through questionable means. But in the end, he was the one who fell into a trap. The servant told the master in a frightened voice that it was currently unknown whether he was still alive. The owner got angry and jumped to his feet. He demanded that the insect child be released. He wanted to find his son. The monk jumped to his feet. He said that recently the head of the Z family had done him a great favor. The Buddhist smiled slyly and said that he wanted to take care of this matter. The owner smiled at the monk and said that he agreed. He was ready to give his son to the care of the Buddhist. He promised to thank him in return. The monk asked the servant to show him the way. Time was running out. The young gentleman was still tied to the chair. He angrily called his visitors bastards. He angrily asked the guy and his wife how they dared to destroy his foundation and steal his essence. The hostess stretched happily and said in a contented voice that she felt good. The mother said in a pleased voice that she could hear her daughter playing and laughing in the park. Chen told his partner that as one progresses in the field of improvement, the sensitivity of the soul increases. The prisoner looked at his captors with fear. He wanted to ask them something. A bright light appeared near the body of the protagonist and his wife. This was the peak of ki purification. Chen joyfully turned to the side. He said to the young master in a sly voice that they would now see what kind of prey he would become bait for. C looked at the main character with great fear. He angrily asked him how he understood everything. Chen sternly told the prisoner that he had sent a message with the spirit insects. The protagonist was ready to hide 100 golden moths, mothers and babies, among thousands of spirit insects. This would help hide their path. The young master shouted angrily that moths were very rare. They were very difficult to raise. Only members of the main family could carry one mother and one child. The main character swung his hand sharply and hit her in the face. Chen looked at the woman and said that they needed to get ready first. The wife asked her husband with excitement what they needed to prepare for. Chen put the papers with the spells on the table. He told the woman that they would soon encounter the realm of the foundation or even higher. The hostess asked the main character in fear what they should do now. The main character said that during battle, magical weapons and tactics are important. Chen told his wife that a child could defeat an adult opponent with the same weapon. If a child has a weapon called a gun, then the chances of victory become equal. The hostess said in a joyful voice that the child was guaranteed to win if his weapon was superior to the adult's. Chen held a magical amulet in his hands. He said that such artifacts are useless against the perfecting foundation kingdom. The main character stretched the amulet string in his hands. He decided to improve these magical objects. Zhang came to the outskirts of the city and looked at the sky. He saw a magical 8 there and realized that he had arrived at the right place. The monk approached the servant from behind and said that he wanted to scout out the situation. The monk closed his eyes and folded his hands in prayer. He activated a Buddhist spiritual technique. The Buddhist opened his eyes. He used divine sight and clairvoyance. The monk saw the protagonist and his wife sitting at the table and eating food. He realized that these people were at the peak of ki purification. A Buddhist saw a girl riding on the back of a corpse called Puppet. Zhang asked the monk with excitement, "Is everything okay with the young master?" The Buddhist said in a frightened voice that young Master C was still alive. The monk told the servant that the young master's aura was very weak. His essence was taken away by evil magic. The main character turned to the side and said in a displeased voice that the strangers had gotten to him quickly. The monk folded his hands in front of him and looked ahead with displeasure. He was silent. Zhang folded his hands in front of him and asked the monk to save his young master. The monk suddenly disappeared. The servant looked ahead in surprise. The Buddhist flew over very quickly and landed on the ground in front of the main character. The main character asked the stranger sternly and displeasedly who he was. The monk studied the main character carefully. He could not comprehend him. The Buddhist approached the main character and said that he wanted to return the young master to Z. The monk bowed to the protagonist and told him to return to the righteous path before it was too late. The main character looked at the monk with great displeasure. He didn't like his words. Chen told the guest that the young master of the Z family wanted to kidnap his daughter. He needed her to practice the dark arts. The protagonist defended himself so as not to die. The main character asked the master how he would judge him in this situation. The angry servant sternly accused the guy of merely denigrating their young master. The Buddhist told the protagonist that he would never believe him. He demanded that he free himself and give up all the evil artifacts. The monk looked slyly at the guy and said that if he fulfilled all the conditions, he would let him live. He told the Buddhist in a very displeased voice that he did not even understand the meaning of the words he was saying. The hostess held an axe near the hostage's head. The protagonist told the monk that if he moved, he would take the young master's life. The Buddhist looked closely and saw the woman holding an axe near her head. The servant pointed his hand forward. He shouted at the protagonist that they would make him pay with his life if he harmed their young master. The monk folded his hands in prayer, preparing to grab the protagonist before they could continue this conversation. The Buddhist threatened the woman that he would destroy them all on the spot if she harmed his nephew. The protagonist looked away in fear. He noticed that the monk had jerked his hand forward and grabbed him by the neck. The protagonist realized that the Buddhist would not use all his strength to kill him. The monk wanted to capture him to use him as a bargaining chip. The Buddhist told the boy that the gap between them was already very obvious. He didn't want the boy to force him to do anything. At that moment, a sword whistled in front of his face. The demonic warrior swung his blade in all directions to hit the monk. The Buddhist quickly disappeared. The monk very quickly jumped aside to a safe distance. The warrior stood with a large sword and protected the main character. Zhang stretched out his hand in front of him in fear. He shouted at the guy that he could still summon ghost warriors. The protagonist summoned the Phantom General to him. A huge warrior surrounded by a dark aura appeared in front of him. The monk calmly told his opponent that he had truly great abilities, but that he needed something more serious than an ordinary Phantom General to fight him. The monk stood and calmly watched as two masters with blades attacked him from above. The Buddhist folded his hands and activated the Amitabha spell. He wanted to protect himself from the warriors. The general suddenly jumped up and ran forward with his sword against the Buddhist. The warrior swung his blade with all his might and prepared to strike the Buddhist in front of him. The monk folded his hands in front of him and activated the Amitabha magic skill. The Buddhist used the hand of great compassion. He tore the warriors apart. The servant said in a joyful voice that the Phantom General would not be able to oppose the master of the Middle Foundation realm. The Buddhist looked closely and saw a small magical artifact flying towards him. The monk put his hand in front of him and stopped the talisman flying towards him. Suddenly, a very bright explosion was heard in front of the Buddhist's hand. Dark aura scattered around. Suddenly, a huge demonic hand appeared in front of the Buddhist. The hand grabbed the monk by the neck with all its might and began to strangle him violently. The servant was very scared. He did not understand who had just grabbed the master. The protagonist angrily told his opponents that the ghost general was simply distracting them so that he could summon this. A huge demonic warrior with horns appeared. He held the Buddhist by the throat with his hand. The frightened master looked ahead and said that the ghost king was in front of him. Zhang asked the boy with fear how he was able to summon and control the ghost king. This ghost had been worshipped by his family for centuries. The protagonist said angrily that in order to command the 5 immortals and ghostly creatures, one must use desires as bait. The creatures must be lured with what they desire. The ghost stopped. He turned around and looked at the guy with displeasure and surprise. The surprised servant could not understand how Master Minmin could lose to the main character. The ghost was strangling the frightened monk. Minmin thought to himself in fear that the Ghost King had struck him in a vital spot when he could not dodge. The monk looked at the protagonist and realized that for such a young man, his plans were completely incomprehensible. The Buddhist could not free himself from the grip on his neck and developed a bloody cough. The ghost continued to hold its victim with its hand and squeeze the Minmin's throat with all its might. The warrior stretched out his hand forward and pulled out a small green ball from the victim's body. The ghost looked at the ball happily and said that the elixir of the foundation was a wonderful treasure. The monster prepared to swallow the green ball. He carried it with his paw to his mouth. The main character ordered the monster not to eat the ball. The treasure was for him. The ghost turned to the man with displeasure. After this, the warrior unclenched his hand and let go of the monk. The Buddhist began to fall to the ground. The ghost sternly extended his hand to the protagonist. He was unhappy because the man wanted to take his treasure. The warrior angrily asked the main character why he ordered him to give up the war trophy. Chen explained to the ghost that his art of transforming into Yang would help him overcome the difficulties faced by the mid-level Ghost King. The monster said to the man with displeasure that in all of China, less than 100 people could reach the foundation level. He himself, with the help of the precious elixir and cultivation technique, could achieve a breakthrough in a year. The ghost looked at the main character with displeasure and asked, "What could be even more valuable?" The protagonist approached the monster. He said that he could give him another method that would help him become a ghost lord. The ghost shouted to the guy in fear that this method was lost 1,000 years ago. He could not understand where he could have gotten this method from. The main character promised the ghost that he would first deal with the 2 guests, and then he would send him a message. The warrior himself will decide how realistic this method is. The demonic warrior turned to the side. He looked at the monk and the servant with displeasure. The warrior swung his arm wide and threw a green pill at the protagonist. Chen turned around and looked closely at the bright green ball in his hands. The ghost began to disappear into thin air. He threatened the guy that he would not forgive him if he lied to him. Chen saw a golden artifact falling into his hand. He decided to give the ghost the best method of improvement. The boy clutched the magic medallion in his hands. He decided that when the ghost came out of seclusion, he would become his servant. Chen shouted to the servant to pass on the message to the master. If the master wants the young man back, then he must offer something valuable. Zhang asked the protagonist to name his exact price so that he could pass it on to his master. The protagonist sternly told the guest to prepare as much money as the young master cost. He demanded that the servant and the Buddhist leave. Zhang promised the boy that he would pass on his words to his master. He reminded the protagonist that he had insulted the Z family and the Lotus sect. Now he must be careful. The main character stood and watched with a long gaze as Zhang walked away from him along with the monk. The main character, after talking with the uninvited guests, turned around and approached the door of his house. The wife joyfully ran up to her husband. The daughter stretched out her hands to her father and looked at the green ball in the boy's hands in surprise. She didn't understand what kind of treasure it was. The main character told the surprised girl in detail that he had the elixir of foundation in his hands. The young master couldn't believe that the protagonist could defeat Master Mingming. This Buddhist was a mid-level elder of the Foundation realm from the Demon Suppression Hall of the Lotus sect. The main character swung his arm with all his might and hit her in the face. Chen hit his captive with a left slap from the Qi Refining Cultivator. The hostess looked at the green ball with displeasure. She did not understand how the guy wanted to use it for their paired improvement. The main character held a magical green ball over his hand. He said in a cheerful voice to his wife that she was becoming more and more skillful. The hostess told the guy in a sly voice that she really did have pleasant sensations. The woman ran up to the main character and said that she needed his help. He told his wife in a very joyful voice that he was praising her quite sincerely. The daughter came up to the side and put her hand on her mother's leg. She asked the woman, why did her face become so red? The mother leaned over to her daughter and said that it was already very late and she should go to bed. Chen told the girl goodbye that mom and dad still have a lot of work to do to become better, and looked at her mother with excitement and asked, is it convenient for her to get better? The woman became embarrassed. She turned away from her daughter. Huan extended her hands to her. The mother sat her daughter on the bed. She explained that she and her father wanted to become stronger. They would be able to stop the bad people who wanted to take the girl away from them. Han looked at her mother and told her to study comfortably with her father and protect her. The girl turned to the side on the bed. She told her mother that she was already asleep. The hostess breathed a sigh of relief and turned around. The main character looked at her happily. The woman was sitting on the bed. She told the guy that this position for couple cultivation was very strange. Chen lay down and bent over. He told the woman on top of him that this method would activate a divine ability called the Ushin Gate before laying the foundation. The hostess turned around and told the boy that they should have had the elixir of the foundation. They could just swallow it like before. Chen looked up at the mistress and told her that on the path of refining qi to create a foundation, one must concentrate qi. One must temper one's body through 10 years of rigorous training to strengthen the muscles and bones. Only then can the body withstand the enormous pressure of compressed internal qi. The main character told his partner that if the physical body is weak, it will be like a ball. Chen explained to the woman that if there is too much pressure in the ball, all of its meridians will rupture. The young man from the Z family of Yin Mountain reached the qi refining peak. He wanted to take away the daughter of the protagonist. The young master wanted to use the Yin Mountain method to bypass the body cultivation realm and forcefully reach the foundation realm. Thanks to the paired cultivation, the protagonist and his wife were able to unlock the divine ability of the Ushin Gate. Now their bodies could instantly recover from injuries. The wife told the guy in an understanding voice that if the balloon deflates, it can immediately recover and the meridians will not be torn. Chen looked at the woman from below and said that during cultivation they must get rid of all unnecessary thoughts. When their emotions and feelings reach the peak, the elixir from within will activate the hidden effects of the divine essence of the Ushan in their bodies. The hostess turned around and asked the guy, are their bodies really that amazing? Chen explained to his partner that their bodies, like beautiful jade, a stone remains a stone if no one recognizes it. Chen tapped the woman on the back with his fingers and said that they should begin. The hostess felt a surge of magical energy in her body. She stretched her leg to the side. The woman bent over. She felt a surge of strength deep inside her body. Chen looked up in surprise in front of him. The hostess was standing next to him. The main character looked up in surprise. He didn't understand what kind of feeling was in him. Chen looked at his trembling leg. He decided that his heart was shaken by De Luodao. The surprised hostess felt that everything in her body was very good. Chen closed his eyes. He realized with surprise that he had used this method of laying the foundation. The woman was sitting on top of the guy. She told him that this method was even better for her than the method of their improvement had been before. He shouted very sharply to her that the time had come. The main character looked at the woman from behind and shouted that the precious elixir was ripe. A bright glow appeared near the guy's body. He shouted to the mistress to collect the elixir. The woman opened her mouth. Bright elixir began to flow into her from the guy. This was the first-level method of revealing the divine ability of the Eard. The main character absorbed energy from behind his wife. After absorbing energy, the body will not deteriorate. The physical form remains unchanged forever. The young gentleman was tied to a chair. He looked from the side with surprise at the main character on the floor with the woman. Surprised, he looked at his captors and did not understand what they were doing. He also did not know about the method of divine ability called the Ushin Gate. The main character opened his eyes and looked to the side. He realized that she was watching them from the side. The beaten monk lay on a pillow on the bed. He said that the main character was very cunning. In all his years of subjugating the demon, he had never met someone so evil and difficult to read. The man excitedly asked the master if he knew from which lineage Chen had inherited the cultivation technique. Suddenly, some woman kicked the door down. She angrily asked her father, "Where is her son?" The lady asked sternly and loudly who dared to kidnap her son. The man turned around and told his wife that Master Mingming had been seriously injured while trying to save their son. The man approached the woman and sternly said that they would talk to her outside. The woman slammed the pot on the floor with all her might. She angrily told her husband that he was a useless old man. Because of him, their son had suffered such humiliation. He sternly shouted at his wife that all this happened because she spoiled their son. The lady fell silent. She thought very deeply about her husband's words. The man sat down in a chair and irritably clenched his fist. He said that the main character was deceived by some fool greedy to death. He dragged them into the family in this whole story. The woman told her husband that their son carries the legacy of the Ghost King. In the future, the boy will gain great power and glory. The lady was displeased. She could not understand who dared to go against her son. The woman turned around and headed for the exit. She decided to go and save the guy herself. The husband warned his wife not to act impulsively. He told her that Master Minmin had fallen into the protagonist's trap. He decided to first come up with a plan and save his son. Then he would strangle Chen. The lady turned around and told the man that she would not wait another minute. She decided to sort things out herself. He asked the woman, "Is she really talking about the dowry with which she entered this family?" The master said that he would stay by Master Mingming's side and maintain the alliance with the Lotus sect. The woman is now responsible for their son's life. The lady turned around and told her husband that he himself was only now at the peak of the kingdom's foundation. The lady stood in the doorway. She called her husband a useless piece of trash on the go. He became angry. He looked angrily and silently after the woman who was leaving. The lady approached the huge red gates. She prepared to open them. The woman stretched out her hands forward and opened the large gate. It was very dark inside. The lady entered a huge room. There was a huge brown stone hanging from the ceiling. The woman took the magic green bell and rang it. The sound spread around. The lady continued to ring the bell. She demanded that someone follow her. Suddenly, someone's laughter came from the very depths of the black stone. The lid flew off to the side and a black sarcophagus opened. The lady stood on the ground and looked at everything attentively. The woman was very pleased. She looked attentively in front of her inside the black sarcophagus. Someone looked at her from there. The main character was at home with his wife. It was a bright day outside. The woman stretched and asked the guy if everything had happened to him. The main character took the blade and extended it to his hand. He made a small cut on it. The wife looked at the guy's hand in surprise. She asked, "Is this really the legendary divine ability of the Ushan Gate?" Chen explained to his partner that this was just the basic effect of the divine ability. A new enemy was arriving soon, and they needed to prepare for what should happen. The hostess asked the guy with great excitement if they should do something serious now. Chen held a knife in his hand. He told the hostess that in order for everything to work out, she should undress quickly.